Today we're talking about the newest Dev Insight, which happened just yesterday. I had the fun experience of watching it on Mixer this time because it's not on YouTube yet, and I found out quite a few new things about what's coming to SMITE and also how some gods are performing in the current meta, and that is what we're going to talk about. First, we will talk about some gods that are nerfed in the upcoming patch. The first one is going to be Jormungandr. He was actually already played in the SPL before he got his buff, especially Zeros played him in middle quite a fair bit, and after that he got a buff on top of that. And based on that we can expect a little nerf for him later down the road, because right now he is performing pretty decently. We'll look into his stats in a little bit. Then there's Ao Kuang. Ao Kuang is actually the most banned god in ranked at the moment and is, according to Horus, super OP, and they actually used the word OP for this one. I was actually a little bit surprised by this. I looked into the stats and his performance is not necessarily overwhelming, except for in an area between gold and platinum. He's lower than that in silver and then falls off in the highest divisions, but he is simply banned a lot. It's especially interesting from the standpoint that in Weekend's latest tier list he's actually not rated highly at all, and I honestly don't think he's completely overwhelming compared to other junglers right now. I feel like he's definitely not a terrible jungler, but I wouldn't have placed him as in dire need of nerfs, but apparently he seems to be very, very strong in certain situations right now and will get a nerf. And then there's Naja. Naja will not get any nerfs, but Naja will get the Project Olympus treatment, so he will see a lot of fixes to his kit, a lot of more consistency with his abilities, how they are confirmed, and them actually working the way they intended to work. And then we have Habois, who is, according to Horus, wildly powerful right now and will also see some nerfs after now seeing a little bit more popularity. But we're also getting some buffs along with the nerfs. The first ones here are going to be for Horus and Scylla. They both had their quality of life improvements in the last patch, so that was something to stabilize them a little bit more, and Horus wants to keep a close eye on them, how they perform after this patch. But they are still generally on the weaker end, and it's questionable how much they will rise up with those fixes. I think especially Horus is going to rise up quite a fair bit actually. Horus is considered in a safer spot by Horus than Scylla so far, and Scylla is more of an underperforming character and will most likely see buffs. He at the same time also has a higher skill cap, so it's a little bit of an up and down basically to see how much of a buff he should get. But generally speaking, both are on the low end of the spectrum. I'm especially curious to see which direction Scylla is going to go in here, because I think he needs more tweaks than outright buffs to make him perform a little bit more consistently and make him less snowbally, and we'll see if that actually happens. And then we will also see buffs to two classes potentially, being Guardians and Warriors. The buffs for Guardians were actually not expanded upon much here, outside of the fact that it seems like those buffs would be targeted a little bit towards solo lane. The general idea with the other buffs was to bring Warriors back into solo lane, and Horus has succeeded in that, but they are not quite happy with the selection of gods that has made it back. It's just a very small god pool of the same Warriors being played in solo over and over, alongside with Camelsots basically. And this could potentially change through item changes. Horus is considered to make selective changes to either Berserker Shield or Gladiator Shield Warriors, and then see how that works out for them. I personally think this is a very risky call. I can see that Horus wants the Warriors back in solo, but I think it's more about nerfing the top Warriors now than buffing the bottom Warriors so much, because what could happen otherwise is that solo becomes a very overwhelming role, because they are already pretty strong this season. They're not the strongest they've ever been, but especially with the jungler nerfs, they see less presence from that, and you kind of have like these very separate islands of solo and duo where the ADC is on their own later on. And those roles get very farmed, and everyone else kind of doesn't get the same benefit to that degree. That is, on a level of play where the support doesn't stick to duo the entire time. And having seen a few metas where Warriors were completely overwhelming and really there was no point of the game where you could gank them, we're getting closer to that again, and I really don't want to see it, so I hope Horus is very, very careful with these buffs. Now let's take a closer look at the gods that got changes recently and how they are performing. As usual, the stats here are taken from Platinum Plus level Ranked Conquest as well as Platinum Plus level Casual Conquest, but there's some actual differences as the MMR that's looked at here, and mirror matches are excluded. The first one is King Arthur. King Arthur got a change to his ultimate where it doesn't do true damage anymore and instead does physical damage. Apparently, some people had the perception based on the numbers that this was a buff to King Arthur. It's kind of irritating to me that people would actually not understand the difference between true damage or physical damage at this point, but let's just say those were hopefully newer players. And this was definitely a nerf because the damage value is significantly lower with physical damage simply because you have the base protections that work against the damage here. So the goal of what the perception was supposed to be was not achieved at all because some people actually thought he was being buffed. In reality, however, his win rate, which was already quite lowish overall, with 78 went down to 92. And that's not all. I actually looked at the newest SMITE GG stats, so shortly after that, only for ranked. And in Platinum Plus, he is now the second last rank in the game. This will be very surprising to many, I'm sure, and I'll discuss this whole topic in a future video in more detail in depth. We'll just look at King Arthur specifically. What we can also say is that his popularity went down a little bit from spot 7 to spot 14, but still a reasonable amount of play. And he is already getting another nerf, or rather that's why he's at the second last spot now, because his energy gain was also nerfed along with this. King Arthur has very high skill potential and specific applications according to Horus, so there are situations where it's still very strong, and this is especially visible in the SPL as well. They do not want to put a longer CD on the ultimate, but that's why they worked on that energy gain instead. And they say that even if he's in the lower percentage of win rates, his performance is still going to be okay for his level of skill. They don't want him to be in the higher ranks because he's supposed to be a hard god that only a few players can play really well. With Jormungandr, we had an increase in basic attack damage, and the 2 can now no longer be interrupted, or rather when it gets interrupted, then it can be refired instead of going on cooldown. Now, previously, Jormungandr wasn't exactly at the top of the performers with a win rate of spot 73. That went up quite a bit after the change to spot 35, and I think maybe seeing how he is played in the SPL also contributed a little bit. His popularity went down the slightest bit from spot 1 to spot 3, but that's only because Horus and Zed were introduced, so he's still very, very popular. And he's also not banned much at all. He's usually picked even in ranked, and other bans are prioritized. Horus therefore thinks that he seems strong, but not frustratingly strong, despite being very flexible on where you can play him as well. Ajax said that Jormungandr is not particularly hard to play, because his ult is such a great safety net. I'm actually a bit surprised by that because I think the impact that you can make as a Jormungandr player depends highly on how often you hit the ultimate, and you have to learn that first, and not everyone is going to be equally good at that. So I think he's not super easy, but of course he's a very safe guard at least. And in my opinion, the same goes for his combo as well, because you can't really always apply that the way you'd want to, but that's just me. And according to Horus, he is possibly one of the most popular guards they have ever created. But we will see how much of a nerf he gets now in return to the performance that he's showing right now. I think it might actually be quite a bit of a nerf, considering that I think he is a rather strong guard overall right now that could actually be ban material. And then there's Izanami. Izanami got a buff to her passive, to her slow, and to her leap animation. The perception for that was kind of interesting. The initial feedback was, wow, that's a lot of changes to her, but the pros kind of just said, yeah, she's good now after playing her a bit. No one was really like, okay, she's completely broken and overwhelming. Her win rate actually went up from 48 to spot 21. This is the highest win rate increase in ranked this patch as well, with 12%, and her popularity went from 65 to 54. But she's still not really being considered much by many players, yet very strong. Horus is very surprised by this. I personally am not quite as surprised. I think the thing is that she isn't that popular because it's not really an early game hunter meta, especially with how much free farm you get at later stages. And I think therefore many people just opt into other hunters that have more impact in late game, whereas her pressure is really in early game. And with how much farm you're getting as an ADC right now, it's not really that much of an issue in the early game. You're not really getting pressured as much, so you don't need as much pressure either. But maybe some Izanami picks will be able to reshape the meta here. And speaking of hunters, we also have Hou, whose self-root during the ultimate was removed. Really more of a quality of life change, but still obviously a buff. His win rate went from 97 to 86, and Horus said he's been statistically overrated for his entire life, with his highest win rate ever being 42, but that being okay because he's rather hard to play. His popularity went up a lot from 55 to spot 27 because it just feels nice to play. And last card is Ganesh, who got an increased power buff duration on his 1, increased magical protection on his 2, or rather he has the same magical protection as physical protection on his 2 now, and increased dash damage on 3 as well. And the perception here was very limited rather. There was very little discussion about it. Horus expected negativity because apparently a lot of people tend to think that Ganesh is the epitome of balance. I didn't know that. I thought most people think he's a bit underwhelming, but the more you know. And his win rate went from spot 66 to 45, so very much okay, very much in the middle. And his popularity went from spot 66 to 61. So nothing groundbreaking here, and maybe exactly the change that he needed. Aside from that, we have a few things worth mentioning that are happening at the moment. There's a gem sale until the 4th of June, up to 35% off. And this weekend is a 2x favor worshipper NXP weekend. And also, probably more importantly, there is a cutesy avatar submission contest basically from the community, and multiple submissions can win this as well at smitegame.com/avatar-submission. So if you're an artist and you want your avatar to be visible in Smite and you can draw cutesies, that is your chance to actually have a piece of art in Smite. You also get an in-game title called Artist along with that, and you also get 10 codes for the avatar that you created that you can give away. So mostly a reputation thing here, but at the same time a cool way to have your own art featured in the game. So I guess it's interesting enough for some. And that is it for this Dev Insight summary. I hope this was interesting, insightful. If you enjoyed it, clicking the like button would help me out. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell too. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out.